and welcome to This is USG, a video podcast by the universities at Shady Grove. 9 universities, 1 campus, great results. I'm Khademian, Executive Director of USG. Institutional commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion abound, from small businesses to major corporations, and from public schools to institutions of higher education. Translating commitments and diversity statements into action can be elusive, and transforming schools and workplaces into organizations that are more diverse, where decisions are made through the lens of equity, and where cultures are more inclusive remains a major challenge. Yet remarkable leaders are demonstrating the collaboration, expertise, and insight to foster transformation. And tonight, we have the opportunity to talk with 4 individuals in the University System of Maryland and at USG who are steadily moving forward. Our guests tonight include Zakiya Lee, the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs in the University System of Maryland. Welcome, Zakiya.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thanks. Irene Munster, who is the Director of the Priddy Library at USG and Humanities and Social Sciences Librarian. Irene, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the honor to be here.
Iris Schauerman is a coordinator in the Center for Student Engagement and Financial Resources at USG and is also the advisor to the Student Council. Iris, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be a part of this conversation today.
Great. And Shelby Speer is the Graduate Student Services Coordinator in the Center for Student Engagement and Financial Resources at USG. Shelby, welcome.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you all for being here. It's great to have you. I'm going to start off with a question to allow you to introduce yourselves a bit, but also to reflect on the meaning of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Zakiya, maybe we can start with you. Could you share with us a little bit about your background and yourself and what brings you to this work, but also how you interpret the meaning you attach to diversity, equity, and inclusion as well?
Sure. And as you said, at the University System of Maryland office, I am an Assistant Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs and also Chief of Staff for that unit. And one of my responsibilities way back started with me being the person who helped coordinate responses to a state mandated report. There's a cultural diversity report that we have to do. The regional centers are lucky to not have to do that one, but the campuses do. And that work is what kind of led me into some extra responsibilities as far as diversity, equity, and inclusion are concerned. And right now, I am the chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Council and involved in a number of other efforts that we have at the system to try to coordinate and steer our efforts in one direction, because as you can imagine, there's a lot going on. So we're trying to make sure everything is aligned and speaking together and on the same page. So I'm one of the folks at the system office who helps coordinate that work. And over the years, I've seen the definition or the understanding of diversity change from the beginning when it was, it's just the Diversity and Inclusion Council. But now we hear, as you've explained, lots of conversations about equity, as we should, and conversations about social justice. So when I think about it, for me, it is beyond just the numbers, beyond just how many people are there, and if we're counting different groups, and of course it's broad. It's race, it's ethnicity, nationality, sexual orientation. We do understand it as a broad concept, but the concept that the part of the concept that we at the system office and me personally are most interested in right now is the equity piece and breaking down barriers. So we are still aware of and paying attention to what the campuses are doing as far as composition, but the campuses are also involved in the climate, inclusion, equity conversations, and we're pleased to see that.
Yeah, that's so helpful. That's a great overview and really helpful to see the kind of evolution of the terms as well. So thanks so much. Irene, why don't you talk a little bit about your background and what brings you to this work as well?
Okay, I am originally from Argentina. So as a new immigrant, I went through a lot of challenges in this country, and which have been hard. And I guess several of the immigrants new immigrants or already Americans, but with immigrant families are going through these challenges as well. I experienced that at Shady Grove when students, when I arrived 13 years ago, when students and faculty members came to my office to talk in a private, in a safe place about their issues. And they knew, they had confidence on me, and they knew I was going to try to help. And with the previous executive director, because I didn't know my surrounding, I went to him, asked for help, and we were able to help several of our students. And I realized also that faculty didn't know how they were expressing in their classes, what they were doing, and with no intention they were harming our students. So that's why for me this is so important. And with respect to equity, I think it's an opportunity in life for every person in the society to be equal. We are all equal. We are all the same. So I know I'm coming from another type of society, but I don't see differences. And I hope we will get to a point in the whole world that we are going to accept who we are with our different beliefs and with different ideas. Just accept who we are.
Thank you, Irene. Thanks for sharing that personal journey as well. It's very insightful and appreciated. Iris, maybe tell us a little bit about your background and what brings you to this work as well.
Yeah. So a lot of what brings me to this work is grounded in my lived experience. So I'm also an immigrant. I was born in Brazil, grew up in Chile, and then came here. And I'm the only one in my family to have graduated from high school. So, that has also shaped a lot of my beliefs and what I really think goes with equity, right? So for me is, I think about that fact, right? And it's not, for example, it's not that my siblings or the rest of my family weren't smart enough to, have to be able to finish high school. And in some ways, I feel like they're even smarter than I am. But, I think it was the opportunities that they got and the tools that they had to use those opportunities, right? Or the lack thereof. So a lot of what I've tried to do in my work, specifically with students, I do a lot of direct service with students, has been in really grounding myself, realizing that, I don't have all the answers and that my job really is to listen to the students and make sure that they feel heard, and to really address the concerns that they have as best as I can. One of the things that has really allowed me to get where I am today has been mentors and people in positions of power and privilege who have leveraged that and allowed me to enter spaces, right, that I would otherwise not been able to do. So I really try to do the same with my students, it's do that as much as I can. And when I think about, diversity, equity, and inclusion, for me, instead of thinking about what it looks like, for me, a lot of it is what does it feel like, right? Because I think there's a big difference in that. If in an ideal world, somebody who comes from a historically underserved community will walk into a space and feel like they belong there, right? Like have that confidence of like, yes, I actually belong here and I'm going to be included and my thoughts and ideas are going to be valued. And I feel like right now we're not really there yet. We're getting there. But I feel like right now there's a lot of if you're in a space and you come from population that has not been historically in these spaces, you feel like you are like you should be thankful that you're in the space, right? And so I feel like that those two feelings kind of dictate the actions that people take, right? Because if you're in a space and you feel like, oh, like I am just privileged to be in the space. You may not want to rock the boat. You may not want to like really talk about like what you really think, right? Because you don't know if that's going to be taken away. But if you feel confident and you know that you belong in the space, then you're going to question everything, right? Because you want to make it better. And so I hope, you know, together in a society, we move towards that world where people feel the confident to feel confident enough to question everything and make everything better together. So
that's great. We'll talk more, Iris, about the work that you do with the students, but I know helping them find their voice is a big part of it, and I can hear that in the way you're approaching this work. So I'm excited to hear more. And Shelby, why don't you give us an introduction of yourself and how you come to this work?
Sure. So when I started at USG a little under 5 years ago, one thing I noticed that there wasn't really a presence for was advocacy for the LGBTQIA community. Even though I don't personally identify within that umbrella, I have multiple friends and family members who do, and I know how important it is for them to feel represented and comfortable, and knowing that the school is a safe place for them to be at. So I started advising our undergraduate student organization, which is now called Free to Be, as well as undertake various awareness activities just to make sure that the students do feel comfortable, encouraging other faculty and staff members to go through various different forms of either safe space trainings or like Ally 101 trainings or other types of, understanding changing terminology, pushing for the use of pronouns and having folks introduce themselves using gender pronouns at events, at student events, and just really working towards inclusivity, which kind of brings to the DEI question about one thing I really love about USG is that kind of bouncing off what Iris said, is that students aren't afraid to have those tough conversations, that they're not afraid to challenge each other, to talk about their own identity, their own experiences. We're blessed being at USG where we have such a diverse population and student population in many different ways, and but really knowing that just because we're diverse doesn't mean that everyone has the same experiences and has the same backgrounds and has the same beliefs. So I think that I'm just trying to kind of keep that mission going, my own small way of contributing, and just trying to explore, each of those letters, diversity, equity, inclusion, kind of all mean different things, but how they work together.
That's great. Very helpful. Thank you all so much for sharing your experiences as well. Zakiya, let's focus in on the work that you're doing at the university system level. I know the strategic plan prioritizes diversity, equity, and inclusion. You chair and lead the system-wide group, the Diversity and Inclusion Council. What are some of the priorities of the council, and what are some of the challenges you see in moving this work forward at a system level?
Well, the council to date has been very helpful in providing us guidance and feedback on things that have been coming through, including the strategic plan, most recently the strategic plan, but also when it's been time to adjust policies, to develop what we've called a freedom of expression set of guidelines, restructuring the cultural diversity report I just spoke about a little while ago. That council has been our ears and feet on the ground. They're the ones from the campuses, representation from every campus, from provost and vice presidents for student affairs to communications. We try to do a wide range of folks to be able to get feedback and insight from a lot of different groups, also with representation from our staff, faculty, and student councils. And so they have been great as consultants, and great when it comes to being able to kind of synthesize what we need to think about and maybe even share with the Board of Regents or the Chancellor. So the priorities right now include, again, feedback, consultation on the strategic plan, and then just other efforts that are happening, because as you know, strategic plans aren't going to be able to cover everything that's happening in an organization. So while we are, again, trying to make sure all of the conversations are aligned, we will still use the council's insight and expertise to help us think about the more granular work that's happening at the system office, and then what and how that may get rolled up to the campuses in the way of recommendations or guidelines. And I need you, I'm sorry, Anne, to repeat the last part of the question.
Just what do you see as some of the challenges? I think, you're working across 12 different campuses and everybody very committed to this work, but I'm sure, different approaches, different
Yes.
organizational structures. And so from the council perspective, where you're there also as an assistant chancellor, vice chancellor, you have a bird's eye view of all of this work, but I can imagine trying to coordinate, trying to orchestrate some of this work at
Yes.
the system level is pretty challenging.
Yes, the institutions and the regional centers, because as you know, the regional centers are represented also. And you're right, that's the challenge in all of the system level work is how to make something work for 12 very unique institutions, 3 regional centers, how to not let the campus priorities get lost. And the campuses won't let that happen, but the campus priorities are so different and unique. And we respect that. And we know that you all know what's best for your institution because you're there day in and day out. So the challenge is, yes, coordinating. But then when I just think about the topics within diversity, inclusion, equity, it again is the what we hear across the board is the inclusion campus climate piece is what the campuses are finding as a big challenge. And I don't know if I guess everybody would call it a challenge too, is working on the equity piece. And even at the system level, we've started talking about it as thinking about how to become an anti-racist organization and how to dismantle or deconstruct structural systemic racism. So those are newer angles that we're taking at it that will take some additional work and conversations and will provide a little bit of a challenge. But as you opened up with, Anne, knowing the things that have just happened over the last year, especially, and then when you just go back, you see it's been a pattern. And the Chancellor, the Board of Regents are all ready to make some headway and changes as far as systemic racism is concerned. So that's a new lens that we are examining at the system level. And we'll continue to talk to the Diversity and Inclusion Council about how to best do that.
Yeah, just to pick up on one of the things you said, I think that there are policies that campuses can set, there are practices that the system can set, but ultimately, a lot of this work, I would imagine, is in the classroom, the conversations that are happening in the classroom, the role that faculty are playing. Is the faculty voice an important part of this work at the system level? I think that there's such a strong need or kind of urgency for the classroom to be a space where some of these conversations can happen, and yet they're challenging conversations. Not everybody is skilled at being able to support these conversations. Is the faculty voice an important part of the work at the system level as well?
It is critical. 2 things I would make note of. The Council of University System Faculty, which covers the system and has representation from the regional centers also, recently did a couple of panels on systemic racism, structural inequities, and have started to delve into this as a council. And within the Office of Academic and Student Affairs at the System Office, we have the Kerwin Center for Academic Innovation, who is led by Dr. MJ Bishop, trying to figure out how to, in different ways, to prepare faculty and give faculty resources through usually academic innovation centers at the campus level that will also have a diversity and inclusion angle to it. So you are absolutely right. We recognize that the Council of University System Faculty's most recent panel was attended by a lot of us from the system office, including the Chancellor. And we're looking forward to that group sharing their recommendations, kind of synthesizing what we heard on that group call or the town hall, to synthesize and feed that up so we can think about how to share best practices, discuss challenges, and ways to overcome those challenges. So it is absolutely true that the faculty are going to be critical. And we have representation on the council from the faculty, But as I'm sitting here thinking about it right now with the most recent revelations, it's probably a good idea to include even more faculty voices there, because just a couple aren't enough when you're talking about tens of thousands of faculty around the system.
Yeah, but what a great resource to have the council there as information sharing center and driving that conversation. That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
That's great. Thank you. Irene, you co-chaired Diversity and Inclusion Committee at USG a number of years ago. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how that came to be, and what do you see as the big takeaways or the accomplishments of that committee? Maybe there are some things we can pick up now on at USG that we can help move forward.
Yes, sure. We were convened in 2017 by Sue Edelstein, and we were 4 people, one at Student Services, Andrea Milo, one at Human Resources, Jessica Nardi, and 2 from the library, one of my colleagues, Nicholas Polk, that left, and me. And we were experiencing the difficulty that students and faculty had at Shady Grove. And the 3 of us were just working independently until, with Jessica Nardi, HR was more close working and trying to find solutions for the students. And then Stu convened us, and it was a wonderful committee, and Iris joined us as well in that committee. And we subdivided our work in 3 subcommittees. One was headed by Jessica Nardi on education and training, on microaggressions and many things. And this was open for everyone at Shady Grove, students, faculty, and staff. There was one on events and programming that I was in charge with Iris, and we had films, we have discussion among students and faculty that were so rich, where it was just incredible. And this is something we should continue or bring up, and that was called USG Reacts, and that was after what happened in North Carolina, I think, the events. And then there was a 3rd one on communication that Andrea and Nicholas worked, and we had the first statement on diversity and inclusion for the campus that was accepted by the cabinet. One of the recommendations that we had that we thought was the most important was to hire a full-time diversity and inclusion coordinator. We were doing this, and we continue doing this from our heart as volunteers, but this doesn't work in the long run. We need really someone who understands I'm just an amateur, that I am fighting inequity, but we need someone with the knowledge to move us forward. And that is one of the reasons also that I'm just adding that I'm working also on a faculty and staff professional development, where one subgroup is on diversity, that Iris also is sitting with us there. And we're trying really very hard to train faculty, because again, I heard students telling me how bad they feel at their classes when faculty, without understanding, use a term that really hurts them. So we need to train not only faculty, we need to train ourselves, because sometimes we don't know what we're doing or saying to offend someone.
Yeah, thanks. I've read the reports. It's impressive work and a lot that was accomplished. So I hope we can continue to build on that work and those recommendations, including hiring somebody who will lead on our campus to do that work as well. So thank you, Irene. Iris, you have taken the lead on as really stimulating the work of students around this. I know you've done a lot of work yourself. You've served on a lot of committees and done a lot of work yourself, but you've also really inspired students to lead on this work as well, and to find their voice and to host some really amazing conversations. Could you talk a little bit about your approach to this work here at USG, and share some of the work you've done and some of the events that have taken place here to foster greater diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started at USG October 2017, and one of the things that I was hired to do specifically was to do diversity programming at USG. And in conversations, just trying to like gauge what was done in the past and what was the engagement of students in those things. One of the things that I kept hearing was, we have low engagement, not a lot of people come, all these things. And one of the things that I questioned was like, okay, but why, right? And how can we change that? So that's where some of my efforts in putting out a survey for students at the universities at Shady Grove, to kind of, hear from them, what was it that they wanted in terms of programming, right? Because one of the things that I really believe in is that you have to work with people. You can't do things for people, right? And so I really wanted to do that. I wanted to hear what they wanted to do, and why they wanted to do those things. And so from that information, put some focus groups with students, and really, work with the student leaders on campus to formulate some of these programs. So for example, one of the things that came out of the survey was the diversity learning series, because students kept saying like, we definitely have diversity events at USG. One of the big ones was International Night, but they also wanted opportunities to debate and talk to one another about their different perspectives on things, right? And so they were like, we need that opportunity. We want that opportunity. And so that's where the diversity learning series came from. And we did some we did different things. One of them was with Irene. We did one on gun control. We had a whole conversation. Yeah. And we had speakers and we had students share, and we did it on a couple of different topics as well. And then it became slowly something that was really not just for students, because I wanted to make sure that they had that space where they felt safe in sharing those ideas, but also that students could lead parts of those activities and topics. So that when I started that, we had a cohort of about 12 students, and we just finished with 39 this past year. So it's one of the successes of that has been that also one of the things that students also mentioned when I started was that they were always preaching to the choir, right? Like, where are the people that we want to talk to? Why are they not here, right? And so that became an intention of recruiting students, because I wanted students to be able to have that opportunity with one another, to be able to disagree, see the humanity in one another, and come out of that conversation feeling like it was a fruitful one. So that was one thing. And then the other one was actually the talent show. So the talent show was one thing the students said, diversity is not just about, these topics that we talk about, but it's really about celebrating, what makes us unique in our talents. And so that was one of more of the fun ones. We changed International Night around as well. And we also started the cultural tea time. So the cultural tea time, it's an opportunity for students to lead an event where they talk about their culture, where they come from, and what makes them unique. And so they can do that through various different ways. Some choose to bring food. A lot of students bring food. Some of them perform. Some of them do PowerPoint. Some of them, they have done all kinds of things. So that one, their lowest attendance, I think it was about 17, and our highest was when we started it, and when our highest was around 92. And that was actually one that not only students did, but they worked together with Gloria Calotra, one of our assistant director in our office, as well as other staff, and they came together and put together something really amazing to showcase the Philippines. So that became like a monthly thing. And then one other thing that I want to mention is that there was a comment actually in one of the surveys that said that they would like to see more things about African American culture specifically, because they go to these events and there's nothing specifically about like for example, International Night, it used to not have like a US table, right? And so they wanted those opportunities as well. So we started doing some events, and Student Council really took on some of the conversations around social justice and systemic racism and all of that. And then we also started including a US table at International Night, which actually GSA and Shelby Speer here led, because we wanted to make everybody feel like, yeah, you are welcome here. You don't have to be from another country. You can be from this country because you have a culture and a history as well. So that's kind of in the nutshell. But just really working with students and making sure they're part of not just the conversation, but the actual planning and execution of the things that are being done at the universities at Shady Grove.
Yeah, it's a great leadership opportunity for students. And I attended Talent Night. It was amazing. The breadth and range of talent was phenomenal. And you're right, what a wonderful way to showcase diversity as well. So it's great. Shelby, maybe you can pick up on that. Iris referenced some of the work that you've done. I know I've attended a workshop that you've organized. You've got a fantastic newsletter that you put out for the LGBTQ plus community as well, and for all of us to learn more about LGBTQ rights and priorities and just getting to know the community. Could you share with us a little bit about some of the work you've done and what's most interesting and important to you as well?
Sure. Always tough to follow, Iris, but I'll do my best. I'm just kidding. So as I mentioned before, I just saw the need coming to USG to really make sure that folks who identify as LGBTQ feel comfortable and recognized on campus. So kind of did that in two different ways. Kind of on the student end, working with the Free to Be student organization, which has had stops and starts over way before I started, but really trying to leverage not only students, but also I've had some faculty and staff as well work with the group. The students have mentioned the importance of knowing that there are folks who they look up to, faculty and staff members who are LGBT in our community. Working with them, and we're all working together. So we've done things such as just doing some general awareness tabling, which a lot of students have really liked, because you can just come up and grab a pronoun pin or grab an information sheet. No one's going to ask you what your identity is. It does, I've had students come up and say, "Wow, this is the first time I've ever worn a they pronoun pin in my life, and this is the first time I feel comfortable wearing that." And just like little small anecdotes like that are just so meaningful that something at the USG community that made them feel comfortable using that identity. Or one person said, "Can I have more than one pin because some identify as different pronouns at different times?" I said, "Absolutely, take information. We'll do some fun stuff like raffles and swag just to kind of uplift the community and show our work towards unity." We did a few years ago a civic engagement event called Trans Thriving about transgender folks in our community, and we had some community representatives from different organizations come table, and we had a nice panel of speakers representing different identities, sharing their stories, and connected that with some of the support resources we have at USG. As I mentioned, we've done some ally training that we call Ally 101 training over the years we have for both faculty and staff and mixed groups. We've worked with different members with the Equity Center at College Park, and also with the center at UMBC to work with some of their resources to get those representatives to our campus, and also to enable us to use the resources at their campuses as well, and promoting especially safe space training and having the safe space physical signs on faculty and staff offices so students know. So just kind of more minor ways, but just really in general showing our support for letting students know that this is a safe space for them. And kind of related to that, I recently joined the University System Maryland Women's Forum, who was featured in an earlier podcast. And one of the things that they are dedicated to is combating racism and sexism. So they actually just started a DEI committee that I've asked to serve on as well. So really looking to kind of take what we've done at USG and really expand it across to the system level as well, working with different women from across the system to see what we can do as a collaborative.
That is fantastic. I'm so glad you mentioned the Women's Forum as well, Shelby, and your role there. We have lots of USG representation on that forum. And what I'm hearing from all of you, it's a tremendous amount of work. Everything, Zakiya, from your leadership at the system level and thinking broadly across the system and trying to coordinate and support across multiple campuses, to focusing on USG and the work at USG at a policy level, at a kind of committee level, and then all the individual work with students and trying to activate this. It's a tremendous amount of work, and it's been very impactful. I'm going to ask you all as a closing question to reflect, if you will, on this past year and a half during the pandemic. It's not that the challenges and the crimes and the incidents that happened during this past year have always been going on, but they were more heightened, they were more visible. During the pandemic, there was much deeper awareness. I think the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many individuals who suffered at the hands of police or mobs or hate crimes. We've been so much more aware of this during the pandemic, and I'm wondering how this past year and a half has impacted the work that you all are doing. Has it given energy to it? Has it given it a sense of urgency? We don't want to lose the momentum with this work. We want to keep this work going in a sustainable, steady way. So I don't think this work is ever done. We have to constantly be doing this work. And so I'm just wondering if you could reflect a little bit on this past year and how it's impacted the work you lead, and how we keep the momentum going moving forward. Zakiya, would you like to start?
Sure, it's definitely impacted the work. I think we can all remember back to May of last year, maybe even a little further back if you want to go to Breonna Taylor, that organizations started putting out all of these announcements, all of these proclamations about how they were supportive of different groups. And what I was pleased to see, for the most part, was that folks realized it couldn't just stop with a statement. People really started trying to figure out what action needed to follow the statements. And I think it's such hard work that we're still in, a year later, still in those planning stages, in those conversations. But I agree, Anne, I was nervous there for a while that the momentum would stop. I think it may have slowed down a little bit, or maybe if I try to stay optimistic, people are just, putting their nose to the grindstone and really working now. So there's less talk. But it has made it more intense. We've had people at the system level every couple of months saying, okay, so what's going on? What's going on? And those questions weren't coming to us before. So I think from the individuals we support and who are part of our groups to the efforts that are happening at the system level, it has ratcheted up the attention, the urgency, the level of import, because it is just something you can't ignore. You have to purposely be trying to keep blinders on to not see what's happening. And I'm glad that we have colleagues like you all and across the system that are not keeping blinders on and that are really trying to figure out what's going on, how can we contribute, how can we help. So it's kept things going because it's making our stakeholders say to us, we need to keep working, holding us accountable. And I think we would all be accountable anyway, but it is good to hear when folks are saying, did you forget about, what about, can we still think about this? So I think it's broadened the attention and the urgency.
That's great. It's good to hear. Irene, what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, I agree with Zakiya that there are nice statements there. And my concern in other meetings I've been or trainings is these are nice words, but there's not much action from us behind those. And I'm concerned that these are going to be nice statements and then everyone is going to forget about them. My other concern might be because of social media. I don't know. I see how much hate is going around not only the country, everywhere in the world at this moment. And my concern is that these groups that have started to try to change something are going to get so aggressive that they're going to be exactly the same as those we are trying to fight against. So those are my concerns at this point. I'm seeing it with a lot of anti-Semitism in the whole world. I'm seeing how they're fighting Latinos or Asian Americans or Asians. So I'm very concerned what's happening around the world, not only the US, but everywhere, and I don't know how to stop this.
Thank you, Irene. Iris, what about you?
For me, I mean, honestly, I feel like this has always been an urgent issue for me. But I feel like my focus has gone from what can I do in the moment to what can I do to change the system, right? Because I think that's really where the work really needs to be focused right now, because we need to change the system. I mean, you know, and Zakiya mentioned this earlier, but the system is doing what it's meant to do. And so we really need to change that. And so the policy side is where my interest has kind of shifted towards, so that we can, you know, create a system where everybody has not only the opportunities, but the tools to be successful. Yeah, that's been mostly it for me. Just what can I do? Like, you know, and I will say one other thing. I think that when we talk about diversity and inclusion, a lot of the times we turn to the people that are actually the people hurting in the system and ask them to do the work. I think we really need to also shift to what can we all do, right? And so I take it back to what I talked about a little bit earlier about leveraging our privilege, right? So whatever privilege we have, we need to be able to leverage that and really work with people, and stop asking people that are hurting to do the work. But yeah.
Thank you, Iris. Thanks. And Shelby, you have the last word.
Yeah.
Past year. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, just kind of piggyback what some other folks are saying about the momentum, and that's kind of my biggest concern. Is, you know, maybe it was because of COVID and because of our kind of focus on the news because of whatever reasons, but I am nervous about some of the lessons that we have learned, and lessons that we could learn may not be continued in the future. That, you know, the support that we've given to certain communities, because as folks mentioned, it's lots of different communities that have been affected, and it keeps happening, and it's just being more brought forward to the forefront, but not to forget about an earlier lesson or an earlier concern because something newer comes up into the news, and making sure that all these different communities that have been affected and may be affected in the future are supported, and just, and the knowledge behind it. Like, for example, I think it's wonderful that USG, amongst other USM institutions, is recognizing Juneteenth and offering the closing the school for staff. But I wonder about how many staff and students really know about what that is. I myself only know marginally about what it is. I personally plan on doing more research, but I'd like to see more about, okay, why is the school closed for this day? What does it mean for all Americans or all citizens of the world? And really make sure that we have the education and the understanding of what goes behind different events.
Yeah, thank you, Shelby. And thank you all for the insights tonight. Thank you for the work that you all lead and for the passion you bring, and for the inspiration that we all need to do this work and to carry it forward. So I feel energized by this conversation tonight. And we have a lot of work to do at USG, but I'm confident that people will take it on, and that we can really make some good, steady progress. So Thank you all. It's been a pleasure to talk with you, and I look forward to our continued work together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.